Hey Megan, hey Lauren.
Hey, Marley.
Hey,
Nice to see you again.
yeah, you too.
How are you?
I'm doing good. Just kept catching up with the snow right now.
Yeah,
How are you?
good. The snow was a complete surprise to me this morning. I guess I just didn't check the weather yesterday. So I woke up and I'm like, oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's pretty bad over here. I think it's supposed to go on for the rest of the day too.
Yeah, I think it is too. I got to work fine this morning, but I'm like, I wonder if I should sneak out a little early and finish the afternoon from home.
Yeah, exactly.
It's too bad out there.
Yeah, agreed. Lauren, you look beautiful.
Thank you. I was gonna say I wish I could commiserate with y'all, but that's why I moved to Florida. So I'm like, snow, where?
Yeah,
I
you
know.
don't wish you could commiserate with us.
I really don't.
Yeah, it's pretty bad out there. I love your background too. That's beautiful.
Thank you. I really love plants, but like I can't ever position my plants and get all their lighting to not look crazy behind me. So I decided to borrow whoever's plants these are.
My house plants probably wish I would do the same.
Oh,
They're like, we're suffering.
Yeah, I'm a big plant person. I love
Me
plants.
too. Cool. So I have 12:01. Let's give it one more minute to allow a few more people to join, and then we'll go ahead and get started.
Works for me.
Awesome. Hey, Lizbeth.
Hey, how are you?
Good. How are you? Good to see you.
Thank you so much. Likewise.
You live in Florida too, right?
I live in Florida.
Yeah. Lauren, Lizbeth, I met her at the last AWAF event. She came all the way from Florida for it.
What part of Florida are you in?
North Miami Beach.
Okay, I'm in Jacksonville, so I'm a little bit, you have nicer weather than I do.
We can't complain.
Yeah.
Sorry, Detroit.
Yeah, we definitely can't complain.
Yes.
Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and get started. Everyone should be able to see my screen. Well, first of all, thank you all so much for coming. We're happy to have you, so welcome. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. We're really excited to meet with Lauren, but before we do, we have a couple of sponsors to thank, and I'm going to announce some upcoming AWAF events. So the first is Magna as our employee resource group sponsor. Our Charging Forward sponsors are Forvia and NASCAR. Our accelerated sponsor is Foley, and then our adaptive cruise sponsors are Envisix and Henkel.
Hey, Megan, I don't know if we can see the screen.
Oh, really?
Can anyone else see it?
I can see it.
You can see it? Okay.
Mhm.
I can see it.
Okay, good. That's good.
I can't.
Oh,
Yeah, I
you
can't.
can. Okay, thanks.
Let me reshare and see if that helps us out. Is that
There we
better?
go. Perfect. Yep, thank you.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
No problem.
Can I ask who's on the phone at 810? We like to take attendance.
Maybe you could chat them.
They won't be able to see it if they're on the phone.
Can you hear us? 429? I'm not sure, Jane. We might have to circle back.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, so I'll quickly go through our upcoming events. The first is the Galentine's Day Mixer. We're super excited for this one. It's at the Hub in Novi on February 8th from 6 to 8 p.m. I don't know how to make this stop. Give me 1 second. So we'll be just mingling, playing games with other women in automotive. That event will support our scholarship program. The next upcoming event is the Conversation with Deb Wall here from GM. That's Wednesday, March 1st from 5:30 to 8:30. And then the last one is Professional Empowerment Day on May 6th. This is a half-day workshop that will include topics that can help you grow personally and professionally. So let me share this again. So now that we've got that out of the way, I'm going to introduce Lauren. Lauren has worked with iconic brands in the automotive industry for 10 years. She is currently the multicultural marketing manager at Stellantis. In her role, she supports head of multicultural marketing and content in developing and implementing multicultural marketing and advertising programs and strategies for Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram brands. Most recently, the team's creative campaign, Where I'm From, featuring ESPN analyst and philanthropist Jalen Rose, was awarded Media Post's 2021 Best Multicultural or Special Interest Group campaign. Lauren is also a board member of the Stellantis African Ancestry Network DISPA Business Resource Group, where she co-leads Communications Committee. She is also a board member of the Women of Stellantis Business Resource Group, where she co-leads the Career Committee. She further encourages professional development as a Toastmasters Club charter member and VP of Education. She recently received the Distinguished Toastmaster Award to recognize her public speaking skills and community efforts. Lauren is married to her husband, Brian Morrison, assistant principal of Westside High School. Lauren and Brian live in Jacksonville, Florida, lucky them, with their 3 children, Naomi 6, Noelle 4, and Khalil 2. So with that, I'll hand it over to you, Lauren, and you can get us started.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Megan. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you all. Yes, I would like to stop screen sharing. Okay. All right, let me know if you all are able to see my presentation, just so I can make sure.
I can see it.
All right. Awesome. So thank you again, Megan, for that great introduction. It is really an honor to be here. And thank you to the Automotive Women's Alliance Foundation for having me today. As she said, my name is Lauren Morrison. I'm the multicultural marketing manager at Stellantis. And I'm really excited to be here today to tell you a little bit more about myself and my experiences as a millennial in the workplace. So before we get started, I love to kind of know in the chat from you all who are watching, as long as you're not driving, where you are in your career. Are you early on in your career? Are you more of an experienced professional? Are you in senior leadership? Or are you in the phase of getting ready to exit your career and going on to the exciting world of retirement? I love to know what stages that we're all in. So if you could share that in the chat, that would be great. So while you're doing that, I'll tell you just a little bit more about me and reiterate some of the things that Megan said. Oh, great. So we've got experience, early career. So it sounds like we're getting a mix of different types of experience. So this will be valuable. Another early career. Awesome. Okay, early career. So this will be really helpful to y'all. I'm excited. So a few things about me: 10 years in automotive. I started out interning in automotive when I was a junior in college at a different OEM. I was in field sales and marketing. And in that role, I spent a lot of time in dealerships, consulting, doing wholesale. It was a very fun job. And then I had an opportunity to work for FCA, now Stellantis. And the company has just provided me with so many opportunities to be able to cross-functionally developed. Oh, we have some more experience, a fellow millennial. Yes, so we're all partner here to the side and we're in skinny jeans. I love to see it. In early-ish 7 years, still feel like I'm early in my career too. So I think we're all on the same page here. Stellantis has given me a great opportunity to cross-functionally develop and really understand how different groups work with one another, and how we holistically make up our global business. So I've been in the US incentives group. I worked in Mopar purchasing for some time. I was in our network development group, where we kind of decide optimal locations for dealerships and things like that. And now I'm in multicultural marketing and advertising, which is one of my true passions, to focus on multicultural consumers and marketing all at the same time. On the personal side, as she said, I'm married to my husband, Byron. He is an assistant principal at one of our local high schools here in Jacksonville, Florida, where I live. So I work remotely in my current role. And we have 3 children, 3 whole children. So I have a 2-year-old. We are entering potty training for the last time, hopefully, with him. His name is Khalil. My middle daughter there, Noelle, who's my artsy one, she is turning 5 in March, and she's getting ready to enter into kindergarten this upcoming school year. And then on the right, we have my 6-year-old, who will actually be 7 on Monday. She's basically 17 at this point, but she's 6 for the sake of this conversation. When I'm not working and when we're not in school, I spend my time cooking, gaming. I'm pretty active in my church. And like many of you, our favorite pastime is going out to eat. And these are really the core memories and core parts of myself, if you've seen the movie Inside Out, that make up who I am and kind of the foundation of my personal brand. And that being said, since we have so many people that are early mid-career, how many of you have started to think about or have already started to put effort into developing your personal brand? You can raise your hand, you can let us know in the chat, but how many of you have started working on that? So as you're kind of putting that there, like I mentioned, I interned in automotive while I was in college, and then I dove kind of headfirst into the industry when I graduated. And I feel like I grew up in life because I started my family, got married all at the same time that I was starting my career. So I feel like I grew up in both worlds at the same time. And I was able to learn a lot of quick lessons that apply to my career and my life simultaneously. So I want to share with you today just a couple of pieces of advice from my own experiences that would have helped me if I had known them earlier on in my career, but can also be applied to anyone at any age, at any tenure, and to either start, personal branding and developing yourself in your career, or to refresh or redefine your career if you've been in your at your job or at your company for a little bit of time. So that being said, let's talk about what I want to share with you today. Career changing superpowers. These are my 3 career changing superpowers that anyone can develop, but especially you. And that's really important to know, because these are things that when done well can boost, refresh, or just revive your career. The only thing that they all have in common is that you have to be intentional about using them for good. And that's why they're superpowers. But enough with the puns. So before we go into more detail about these, just let me know in the chat if there's a superpower that just right off the bat you're really interested in learning more about, or that immediately kind of caught your eye. And what we're looking at here, especially if you're on the phone, is the power to brand, the power to observe, and the power to reflect. And these are things that I have learned throughout my career that help me today just as much as they helped me as I was in the process of learning them. So we're going to dig a little bit more into each one with some practical and tangible things you can start doing to enact them today. So lots of interest in the power to brand. That's actually probably my favorite one. So Here's some tips that we're going to talk more about for each one. And you can take little pieces of these. I'm going to share a decent amount of information, but you can just take one thing that I said and apply it today, and you'll start to see some change, or at least in my experience that I was able to. So for the power to brand, the things that I've noticed most about having to like activate this power are that you have to be authentic to yourself. That's really the starting point for any personal or professional brand. And being authentic just gives you that little extra something that makes you approachable, interesting, believable, and just different from other people. It's really just being true to yourself. Along with being authentic, being polished makes a really big difference when it comes to your brand. Your brand identity is really yours to cultivate, but you should just ensure that no matter what that identity is, that it appears polished and that you put effort into it to other people. And some examples of that are communications. Written communications or verbal should be clear and very easy to understand so that your branding can get across. Your presentation should be concise and prepared with the correct audience in mind, because that shows effort that you've polished your presentation. There's something to be said about the differences between being polished in a work from home environment or remote environment and in person. So from the remote lens, your virtual presence is just as important as your physical presence. So your attire, your background choices, whether it be virtual or not, your sound quality, all of these things are a professional reflection of your brand. So you should always just take that extra step to make sure that you've practiced and that things are in order so that there's no issue with communicating your brand to other people. And when you're in person, and I've experienced this recently myself, when you go for months at a time without working with other people, and all of a sudden you're in an in-person meeting and you realize that people can see everything that you're doing. So you kind of have to be mindful to differentiate body language that should differ in person. So I'm sure many of you even now are multitasking, looking at different things while you have me in the background, which is totally okay, and maybe the way that you process information. But in person, people still expect you to, give them your undivided attention, to use active listening, and to exhibit body language that shows that you value, what they're saying or what meeting that you're in. So those are just a couple of tangible ways that you can make sure to stay polished as it relates to your brand. And lastly, in regards to this superpower, and almost most importantly, you should always deliver. Delivery is essential in your brand development because delivery makes you trustworthy. It makes you believable. And we should always be making the effort to deliver on our objectives. Now, I totally understand that things happen and we can't always reach a number or an objective that was assigned to us, but there's still a way to deliver anyway. Make sure that you keep an account of detailed information of the steps that you took to try to deliver, any improvements you've made, any relationships that you built, any gaps in the process that you were able to identify that weren't previously known. And ultimately, you should be able to describe what reason beyond your control prevented your delivery. And in my book, that's still delivering. So that's the power to brand. Hopefully that was enough for the people who were really interested in that one, but I'm sure we'll have some time in the Q&A if you have some additional questions since that one was popular. So next we're going to go into the power to observe. This is one of my favorite superpowers because I don't think a lot of people ever engage with it. Because you have to be very intentional in observation. And we're all so busy with meetings and personal lives and just trying to get things done and check everything off the list at the end of the day, that it can be very difficult to, create this moment of pause for you to listen a little more, engage with someone a little more, ask that follow-up question. And that's really essential to this power to observe. And my tangible tips for this one are, organizational norms are something that's easy to observe. And these can be as simple as noticing how your organization celebrates birthdays, knowing if people, like to reply all to an email on your team. I don't know why anybody would like to do that, but some people do. So reply all versus replying to just one person. Whether your team prefers camera on or camera off. And these are not norms that you have to participate in, but in acknowledging that they exist and knowing that your team is participating in them, you may get yourself invited to participate in more situations or sit at more tables where you can further use this power to observe. So just something to keep in mind. Next, about the power to observe is developing relationships. You can't really observe someone if you don't have a relationship with them or if you don't know them. So get to know as many people as you can inside of your group, outside of your group, internally, externally, as it relates to your industry. Participate in lunch and learn, schedule one-on-ones, participate in mentoring programs. And if someone emails you to ask you a question and you don't know who they are, maybe just look them up on your company website to learn more about what they do. And building relationships is so essential just for many different areas of the business, but especially in understanding how departments work together and who the decision makers are in that department. But one important thing and caveat to note about this relationship building as it relates to observation is that you should always be trying to authentically build relationships and not with the intent to necessarily gain something. And the reason why I want to elaborate on this one a little bit is that you may have taken all the right steps. You may have, not replied all, celebrated the right birthdays, and made your way into the inner circle of your organization and gotten a seat at that table, and you're trying to build a relationship with someone. But if you're building with the intent only to get a promotion or change roles or anything like that, it will come off as a little inauthentic. And sometimes you never know what you can gain from a relationship, and it may not always be what you expected. You can just understand the business better, how different departments operate. Someone can be an advocate for you and you not even realize it. So just make sure that when you're building these relationships, it is with the intent to observe and authentically get a chance to know someone and understand how their role works. And then lastly, as it relates to the power to observe, communication and leadership styles are important to understand. You should always know the crowd that you're addressing so that you can speak their language and focus on how, if they help you, you can also help them, and they understand that you know what their goals are and that you appreciate their time and what they're trying to accomplish separate from you and your own goals. So those are just some important things to note. So now that we have looked at the power to brand and the power to observe, realize that these are things you can pick up at any point. You can decide to brand yourself today. You can decide to be more observant today. The power to reflect is something that you can only enact after you've experienced something, whether it be a milestone or an important meeting, your 90-day, startup period in a new role or a new company. This is something that you want to enact after you've already branded and done some observing and use those to try to meet a deliverable or make a change or taken some sort of action. So once you're reflecting, the things that I typically do is I ask myself after the event, is this outcome what I expected to happen? If it wasn't, why wasn't it? Did I make any mistakes? Did I need to provide someone any context? Did I need to apologize for something maybe? And lastly, if I get to past those first two questions and I say, well, this is exactly what I expected and I didn't make any mistakes, it's still important to say to yourself, what did I learn? Did I learn that I have a strength that I didn't know that I had before? How can I further hone that strength? Did I build a relationship with someone? Did I fix a process gap? And these are just important things that you can take, and then you can loop them back around to those other two superpowers. The power to reflect is kind of that sweet spot where you're able to reframe and redefine what you want to do and how you want to reposition yourself. So you can take what you've learned there and say, okay, well, now I can polish this thing, I can deliver better in this way. And because maybe I didn't have enough information or I didn't understand how something worked, I can observe these areas. So they all really have this nice cohesive relationship that you can use and remember at all times. And these are kind of the tips that I had for early on in my career, but as it relates to you and where you are, those who are early in your career, the power to brand, very important. The power to observe, very important, to kicking off your career and then learning how to reflect. If you're in the middle part of your career or in the position of changing direction, these are also important to you as well, but you kind of are a little bit more experienced and know a little bit more about how to get your way around in terms of the power to observe and who to observe and where and how to strategically enact that. And then lastly, if you happen to be someone that's phasing out of your career or going into retirement or changing industries even, you really have a great power and you can choose to have the responsibility to take all the times that you reflected and reach back down to pull someone else up with you to say, these are the things I reflected on that helped me with my branding or with my observation or any other area. So no matter where you are in your career or even in your life, these are all things that you should be able to pick up at least one little nugget and apply today to either just boost your career or refresh it or revive it. So these are all the tips that I had that you can start using, but I wanted to leave a lot of time for discussion, whether it be about my background, my career changing superpowers that I have decided to coin today, or any other thought starters that came out of this conversation. So I'll kind of turn it back over to you, Megan, if you want to facilitate that. And if you have any other questions or a desire to further connect, you can use this QR code to add me on LinkedIn and we can continue connecting there. But I would love to stop sharing so we can all see each other a little bit better while I answer the questions.
Yeah, sounds great. Well, thank you for sharing. Those are great tips and just such great reminders. I think you can get caught up in the day-to-day, and it's nice to have these in front of you and to hear it from someone else's perspective about how important they are.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Does anybody have any questions? Anybody want to get started? I can ask Lauren questions all day, so I'm happy to get us started if we want to. Talk to me about how you developed these superpowers. Did you learn any lessons the hard way, or how did these come to be?
Oh my goodness, I definitely learned the hard way. This is a safe space, right, everyone? So I just recall my very first experience interning, out of college and getting my first look into the automotive industry. And I kind of fell into my internship by happenstance because I wasn't sure what industry I wanted to go into. And I went to one of our receptions that we had. I went to FAMU at our School of Business and Industry. And I happened to see this OEM there, and I just happened to get into a conversation with someone because I liked their outfit. And little did I know, a few weeks later, I was off on my way to an internship. And I learned the hard way that I thought, you go to an internship, you put your head down and you just work and you get your job done. And that's how you get, ahead in your industry, or that's how you get recognized. And I very quickly learned that it was much more so about understanding how your business works holistically, building relationships with people, getting a chance to understand those cultural norms and just the overall culture in your office or place of work, and how that applied to dealerships was also very important in my internship. And so in sitting down to develop these superpowers today, I really had to put some thought into what are things that I did learn the hard way, or things that I realized that I was good at that people tend to ask me, how do you do that? And I really wanted to take those things to share them with you all today. So I gave you guys the best of the best that I have. This is all I got.
Talk to me a little bit more about developing relationships, specifically maybe with bold personalities, especially in the dealer space. I know there's a lot of bold personalities there. So how do you go about doing that, either before you have an agenda or something to accomplish, or even without that?
That is a really good question. And the way that I approach things is I like to tackle the tough problems in the room. So some of those strong dealer personalities, once I got a new territory at the time, or even as it relates to like my current roles, if I have a supplier or agency or anyone and there's a tough personality, my first goal is to get that person on my team. So I spend a lot of time just asking that person, tell me a little bit about your background. Tell me, what things keep you up at night. and what's important to you. And I learned those things as far as, is it the bottom line? Is it reaching an objective? Is it, work-life balance? I really like to understand what drives that person. And the first thing I do whenever I meet with that person or owe that person something is deliver on whatever that thing is. So an example would be if I met a tough personality and they said that they were very concerned about managing their work and home. The first thing I'm going to say in a meeting is, you know what? I have really got this down to a science. Our agenda today is very concise. I'm actually going to give you back 30 minutes if we can get through this information and you don't have any additional questions. But I'd love to, stay around if you do have additional time. And I took these extra steps to do research or just to cut time out of our meeting. Immediately, you have got that person's attention. They understand that you care about what their objectives and their goals are, and you can kind of go about your meeting in that way. And that really ends up building trust, and it lets that person know that you value them and the things and goals that they have. And they usually tend to want to work more collaboratively with you after you do something like that.
That makes sense. So it's kind of using empathy to relate to them and then to get them on your team.
Yes, and just remembering things about people, because how often have people had life experiences or, they got a new job, they got a new pet, they had a child, and maybe 6 months later, everyone in the office is still saying, how's the baby? And you're like, well, the baby's name is Everett. Because you call them by their name, and just simple things like making a note about that person. I know some people that are extreme and they have files and they write notes, but I'm a lot better at just finding those kind of like mnemonic devices to remember things about people. But just showing that you actually care and you humanize them is also a very good way just to have a better working relationship.
I think we have a hand raised. Taylor, did I see that you raised your hand?
Hi, Taylor.
Okay, sorry, it took me a second to unmute. We use Teams over here. I forgot to use Zoom. I had a question on the power to reflect. So that's something that I've been trying to work on myself. But one of the bullet points under there is this what I expected? And I think that's something that I struggle with a lot in terms of just kind of thinking about it, because my expectations is usually, did I meet the goal or did I not? So like when you're having that conversation with yourself, like what all goes into that question? Because it's usually for me, did I meet the sales or no? And then that's kind of, I hit it or I didn't. But I know there has to be more that kind of goes into that conversation.
There is. It's about the little details for me. So even when I do meet the objective, I still kind of think to myself, how did that meeting go? So if my goal was to go in and sell an idea to someone and they bought the idea, I still go back and kind of replay the conversation in my mind and think, okay, well, what rebuttals did they have? What things did they say? Like, well, I need more information on this, or can you better explain this? So I could have reorganized my deck or reframed my ideas or included something that wasn't there. Or if I noticed that, we were rushing to the end of the meeting for me to get the sale or whatever I'm doing, how could I have pulled that meeting forward? What could I have cut out to make it even more efficient? So I just kind of like to, regardless of the outcome, replay anything that's worth, reconsidering. Not every single meeting or every single interaction, but if it was something that was significant to me for some reason, I always like to backtrack and replay it and just think, how could this have gone better? And if it literally couldn't have gone better, then I think, okay, well, how do I make this consistent? Because I did really good.
Got it. Thank
But
you.
thank you. That was a great question.
Marley, you had your hand up too?
Yeah, hey, Lauren, thank you so much. This is such a great presentation. You're awesome and you're just glowing. So I'm so happy that you're able to join us for M2Z today. Few questions for you. I know you were talking about the power to observe, and you mentioned doing, one-on-ones or maybe doing mentoring programs or doing lunch and learns. Is there anything in particular that you feel that you've learned from those things, or any tips or, things that you've just specifically remembered that maybe you could share with the group?
Oh, I would love to. So my preference is to do a good one-on-one. I love one-on-ones, and you'd be surprised. I mean, people are, and I understand that everyone kind of has different styles and they're still kind of getting used to a lot of times being in the corporate environment, but people are terrified to have one-on-ones with people that they don't know. That's the biggest thing I get when people say working from home and remote working. It's so like, how do I meet people? What do I do? And I'm just thinking like, just set up a meeting on their calendar. And people are like, oh my gosh, you want me to set up a meeting with a stranger? But I love working from home for that reason, because I'm a calendar snoop. If I see someone that I want to get to know in a meeting like this, like if I say, I really like what Megan was saying and I want to know about her, I will look her up on the company people finder or go look her up on LinkedIn, and I'll look and see, do we have anything in common? Is there anything I want to ask her about? And I'll send her a quick note. Or if you're feeling like me, you're a little bit more on the spicy side, you can just go ahead and set up a meeting notice, and in the meeting notice say, Megan, I really enjoyed what you said during the AWAF event, and I would love to talk to you for a few more minutes about that. And I have never so far had anybody say no to me and decline a meeting. There is something to be said about how to maintain relationships, which is a little bit harder and can be a whole session in itself. But it's so easy to get someone to just agree to have a meeting with you. So just don't be afraid to get to know people in that way. And you can always set up individual time, because it creates that kind of intimate environment where you can personally get to know someone, get to know about their career. Sometimes they share about their family, and you can really start to engage with that power to observe more easily in a one-on-one environment.
Great, thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions, or should I resort back to my list?
I have one question.
Sure.
So I am currently in a leadership class at the college that I'm attending, and we've been talking about different leadership styles, and we've been talking about task-oriented and interpersonal oriented. And I was just wondering, from your point of view, which one do you see to be more beneficial while leading? And if not one or the other, do you see how maybe both together could lead to a more successful leadership style and way of leading a team?
That is a really excellent question. And thank you for asking that. And I think it's more of learning how to blend those leadership styles together. And it depends on if you're looking at that from the perspective of being the leader or someone who works with the leader, right? So whatever is authentic to you, whatever way that makes you feel most productive and passionate, that's the type of leadership style that you should adapt, because you can learn skills from other styles. But if you naturally resort to a certain style, then you kind of have to learn how you can play to the strengths of that style. And if there's any weaknesses, like kind of the micromanagery personality, sometimes that can be beneficial to some people, but you have to acknowledge, you know, these are the ways that some people might not like this and how I can address this while still being true to myself. But in regards to working for that person or seeing how it plays out in the corporate environment, it's great for all the different styles to really work together, because a task-oriented leader may see something in a process that an interpersonal-oriented leader doesn't see. Because sometimes they're focused on different things. And you also have those individuals working differently to build a team, because maybe the interpersonal person is building you from more of the branding side, more of the developmental side, while the more task-oriented person is building up your like hard, skills and your business acumen. So there's definitely benefits, and I'm a big fan of design thinking. So really blending all of those different types of styles and knowledges and tenures and experiences is so important. So I don't necessarily think that any one style of anything is better than another. It's just more so, how do you build up on your strengths, and then how do you account for the weaknesses that may, conflict with other styles.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
That was a great question.
That was a really good question.
Thank you.
I feel like Madison could come up with some more good questions too. Especially being in school, because it's always that time that your brain's thinking the most in that sort of theoretical way.
I know, I instantly got envious. I'm like, I want to take that class.
Right.
And you have a chance to really look like at the business from the outside looking in. So like, these are trends and things that are going on in the industry. Are these actually happening in the workplace? And then the rest of us are kind of like, well, maybe we should be slowing down to try to implement some of these things.
Right.
We got a question in the chat. Any advice on maintaining relationships, especially as an introvert?
Ooh, that's a really good one. I know it probably doesn't seem like it, and you're all not going to believe me, but I am actually an introvert. I am an introverted extrovert. I actually, while skilled at talking to people and delivering a message, I love to be left alone and be in my quiet place. And, I didn't like to go to like the school library or like Starbucks to study. I like to be alone in my room with like the door closed and music on and being left alone. So I'll kind of answer it in two parts. You can maintain relationships by simply really having an interest in someone and acknowledging that there are some relationships that you want to have because they're good connections to make. And it's always great to kind of have check-ins. But every relationship is not meant to be at the same level of depth. So there's mentors that I have that I meet with on, a monthly basis. There are people who I check in with every time I have a problem and I'm texting them like, hey, can you please help me because my hair is on fire? And there's maybe more senior leaders in our company that I really value their opinion and their direction on my career, but I need their advice at a more strategic level. And I really want to make sure that when I engage with them, that I'm value adding to their time and vice versa. So you kind of have to decide, what are these relationships I want to pursue more frequently? And those are the ones you have to kind of worry about maintaining at a regular basis. And then what are the kind of ones that only are going to be that I'm going to be sporadically engaging with? And someone once gave me some really great tips for how to structure a meeting with someone. And they kind of said, when you meet with people and you're trying to, keep this ongoing relationship, start off with a current event or something like that. And I kind of add to myself, I always look to see, what's this person been doing on LinkedIn? Have they been like in the news recently? Have they achieved something at work? So always bring up something that shows that you've been keeping up to date with them, and maybe talk about a current event in your industry. And then after that, you can also talk about any extracurricular involvement you have, like a business resource group or community service, or if you're a mentor or something like that. And then you kind of round it out with talking about your day job and how you're meeting those deliverables. So you're already on track. You don't have any issues. Maybe you could be, but let's just say we're on track. And, then you follow that up with some questions you have as it relates to your job and how you can impact the business, or something like that. Of course, if you have something you really want to talk to them about, you can bring that to the forefront. Like if they know you just had an interview or you're making a change. But it's really great if you structure your meetings that way, because it always gives you something to talk about. And if I'm going to call myself weird. If you're weird like me, if you've had one meeting and you do that power of reflection, you can note that some people don't do well with the small talk. Some mentors or people you want to build relationships with, they don't want to talk about the news or themselves. They'll just say like, oh yeah, that was great. And then you realize you still have like 20 minutes left in your meeting. So you kind of have to have an initial meeting and get a sense of what do they like to talk about, and how long they're going to talk about each thing. And if they tend to, if your meetings tend to end a little bit early, maybe add some other things in there that interest the person so that it is a nice conversation. You don't feel like, oh man, every time I meet with this person, it's only for 15 minutes. But then on the flip side, some people love to talk about themselves and their personal things or yours, and the industry, and then you never get to your question. So you kind of have to meet a couple of times, tweak your agenda, and just make sure that you're really adjusting, like using that power to reflect and that power to observe, to adjust to that person's style. But if you didn't get anything else from all of that, I kind of just said, just make sure that you are being strategic about what relationships that you want to develop and how much time it would take to develop whatever type of relationship that it is. And that will really help you out.
Yeah, that's great advice. It does vary so much. Some people you can walk in and talk easily with for 30 minutes, and others you're like, I need to maintain this relationship. And the quieter it gets, the more pressure that seems to build.
Yeah.
So those are great bullet points to keep in your back pocket.
Yeah, and to be honest, if it feels very forced, even if it is a great relationship, until you figure out what to do, I'm always a pro of saying, I really think that you've helped me out a lot in these conversations, and I don't want to take up too much of your time. So maybe we should meet, a little bit less frequently so that I can have more to share with you. And that gives you a little more time for things to happen. And sometimes just having time pass gives you a bigger volume of things to talk about.
How do you, when you're developing a relationship with a new person, how do you establish that cadence? How do you basically ask, okay, can we meet again in a month? Or how do you kind of establish that norm?
That's a great question. And for me, normally I kind of strategically look at when I do my like reflections for the year, where are my gaps in places that I want to build relationships and who do I want to build them with? So if I say to myself, well, I don't have any connections in finance, I just need a touch point with someone. So I may just meet with that person once and I may just like have them as a connection that I can reach out to again, and we don't have a regular meeting. But if it's someone that is in my like proximity, like maybe another leader in the marketing space in my organization, maybe I'll say, you know, can we please meet on a monthly basis because I have relevant things that go on that I always ask you about anyway. So let's just meet so that we can talk about those things and also catch up. Then there are also meetings to consider. Like we have a monthly meeting where we have to prepare a big presentation for our CEO, and there's people I always need information from anyway. So I always say like, can we just meet once a month? Please don't notice that I'm meeting with you a week before this meeting to get your information early, but let's just meet to connect and I can see what's going on with you and you can see what's going on with me. Or there's also the situation, like I was mentioning earlier, where like I have a mentor that is one of our brand CEOs, and we were meeting on a monthly basis, and we got to the point where we got a really good relationship and cadence. And I felt like I was struggling at one point to figure out, well, what can I talk about this month? Because I'm already in such frequent communication with this person. So I said, you know, hey, do you think it would be a good idea for us to meet quarterly just so I can have more information to share with you, especially since it seems like we kind of have these frequent touch points when something important happens anyway. So I kind of go into it thinking strategically about how often I need to meet with this person. But once I actually have that initial meeting and see how it goes and if it feels natural, I usually at the end say something like, well, I would love to do this again sometime. And most of the time they'll say, yeah, set it up anytime, or let's set up a monthly meeting. And in some cases, I've had people set up the meeting themselves. So if they just say, okay, that's great, you kind of give yourself some bandwidth after the meeting to like think about it and you can decide. And once you suggest it to them formally through an invitation or anything, they usually let you know if it's, you know, too frequent.
Yeah, that's great advice. Any other questions?
Do you
All
want?
right, I have one last one. Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, hi, Lauren. I hope you're
Hi.
doing fantastic.
Thank you.
Hi, everybody. I have a question to ask you. It was brought to my attention that last week when I met with somebody that if you always have women mentors in your bailiwick for your career, that you're really missing out on something. What are your thoughts about having all women or all men, or are you just suggesting to mix the two?
That is a really great question. And I'm even going to take it a step further. I try to make sure I am not being mentored by people who only remind me of myself. Because there's mentors you have for different purposes, right? Like I love to have a mentor who's like me, who has children, who's a millennial. I like to talk to other women of color, other Black women that have similar experiences, because sometimes you need that safe space. However, you really have to look at who has the ability to advocate for you in certain situations and who has the experience to be able to give you really good advice. And so for me, I recommend mentoring with anyone that you think will be able to help you reach your goals. And especially if it makes you uncomfortable, because I have one mentor who is a male, who is a Caucasian male. He does have children, but meeting with him made me so nervous because I thought to myself, what do we have in common? And he is not significantly older than me, but he's definitely not a millennial. And so I was like, how am I going to maintain this relationship? And what ended up happening was, using that strategy I mentioned to you earlier, we were able to kind of at first keep it very professional and just helping me with specific things that I lined out. But the more we talked, the more, you know, the relationship kind of loosened up, and we learned that we do have some similarities, or we learned we felt different ways about current events. So I would suggest that you really just look at, where do you have gaps? Do you need mentors in departments that you're not in, departments you want to move to? Do you have peer mentors? You know, how often are you meeting with your supervisor? Do you have any upper level mentors and advocates? And once you kind of take inventory of who you have like on your team, so to speak, you can really determine who needs to fill those gaps. But I definitely take inventory of, am I only mentoring with people or mentoring to people who only look like me or have my same background or remind me of myself. And if that's the case, then I'm like, oh, let me just go do some research, because this cannot be, I'm missing some skills or some experiences here if this is the only people that I have in my team.
So great information, and thanks for that. I have another question. I sent out to the AWAF team a short little YouTube that really hit home on DE&I. And one of the things that I found really, really interesting was there is a focus on DE, but when you look at the I, it's amazing to me how that should really stand out. And when it is inclusion, it means all inclusion. You know, everybody should be included. What are your thoughts on the I in terms of at Stellantis?
Oh, that's an easy one. Stellantis has been such an inclusive company for so many reasons since I have started working here. From just the allowance, like in my own career, to be able to develop cross-functionally, you get to have experiences from people from all different backgrounds and disciplines. And we have a ton of business resource groups for every and anything. We have a women's business resource group. We have some that are demographic specific. We even have clubs like Toastmasters clubs. We have religious clubs, and we really make a space for everyone to feel included. And we also encourage, like in our African Ancestry Network, for just an example, all business resource groups at Stellantis encourage anyone to join, even if you're not part of that specific community. So within our African Ancestry Network, there's not only Black people on our distribution list, and we encourage others to join and learn more about our culture and things that we do and help our community. And we collaborate with the other business resource groups to do the same. And I mean, you all might have seen Stellantis has a number of leadership development programs that are targeted at women and people in different demographic backgrounds. So I think that our company does a really good job of making a space where everyone can go to feel like they have that kind of intimate, safe space in their background, but they also invite others to learn more about what that is and to serve those communities. So I'm a happy camper over here.
Well, I find it interesting because I've been around for a long time, and it has definitely moved the needle nowadays. And I think it's fabulous. It's not only happening at Stellantis, it's happening at other companies, OEMs and suppliers from, you know, small to big, but it's pretty cool. I like it. Now, are you in Florida now?
I am in Florida. I live in Jacksonville.
That's wrong.
I'm sorry.
It's snowing like crazy here.
But you know, that being said, though, a good thing I also want to mention really quick is one thing I have noticed, regardless of the company that I worked at, is I think that everyone could be a little more inclusive in regards to people who aren't existing in your headquarters location. When I was in the field, that was one of my biggest issues, was that I felt like I really wanted to be part of those communities that were set up from a headquarters perspective. I really wanted to understand how the company worked holistically, but a lot of people didn't have any idea what I did on a regular basis. A lot of the programs were only based locally in headquarters. And you can really feel a little isolated in the field, especially if you're like an area manager of any sort, no matter what group that you're in, and you're traveling a lot and it's kind of a team of you. So I think it's really important for companies to consider reaching out to anybody who's working in their field organizations and ensuring that they have the same level of support and inclusion as the other organizations.
I think that's great. There's a question that came up on chat, Megan.
Yep, I see it. Thanks, Kim. Mo asked, I work in sales and your background and work experience looks very cool. How did you develop your career path besides what you shared in your presentation? Any soft/hard skills you recommend for a person in sales to work on?
That's an interesting question, because my career path was, I just have to say, led by the Lord, because I don't think I would have written that down and told you that was how I thought I would end up where I am right now. like I said, I kind of fell into the automotive industry right after college, and sales and marketing were great places to start, even though as an introvert, selling things is very difficult. I don't really enjoy selling things, even though I have developed the skill to do so. So once I did that, I realized that I was interested in marketing and really like consumer insights and learning how people's minds work and being able to reach them through data insights like that. And so I took a marketing role. And then once I came over to Stellantis or FCA at the time, I realized that the marketing role I had was also pretty incentives focused. So that got me into Stellantis, coming into our incentives group, which kind of relates to marketing a little bit. And once I did that, I realized that in my time in the field, I spent a lot of times in the sales part of the dealership, and I had a lot of experience more on the commercial side. And I wanted some technical experience. I wanted to understand, like on the back end, how things work, because that's a huge part of our business, and for all businesses, a great way for us to impact the bottom line. So I went over to Mopar purchasing to kind of learn that skill. And there were a lot of transferable skills between working with dealers and then coming over and also, working with suppliers at that level. And that was always meant to be cross-functional for me. So once I did that, I came back kind of over closer to the commercial side to look at network development. So instead of learning more about dealership operations, learning about how do we make sure customers can get to dealerships? How do we know this is the best location for a dealer to be? If a dealer wants to relocate or, change anything, what are the implications of that? So I got that kind of knowledge. And then the job that I have now came up, which is pretty much one of my dream jobs that I could have, being a multicultural marketing manager. And I hadn't been in my role in network development that long, actually, but in having those regular meetings with my manager and making sure he understood what I wanted out of my career, he said, I couldn't stop you from applying for this job. I hope you don't get it, but based on what you want to do, I can't say no. And so I ended up getting this role, and that's kind of how I got where I am. And I'm very interested in multicultural consumer insights, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that's kind of how I now, like for my future career efforts, have kind of framed and set up the roles that I would like to be to consider and the skills I need to get those roles. And as far as soft skills I recommend for somebody in sales to work on, really understanding that power to observe. Your best skill is learning how to reach people. If you can reach someone and gain that trust, gain that respect, and make them feel like you value them, you will get so much more information, opportunity to sell, have candid conversations. But that is the most important skill, because relationships in sales are just everything. And after you do that, you can kind of maybe work on your pitching skills so that you can, pitch according to what you've observed.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Lauren. That was
much.
great.
No
Yeah.
problem.
Any other last minute questions?
And I just think it's interesting that I think you are in the Hemi mode you're a Hemi engine in the car, and I think you're leaving a lot of people in the dust right now because you have so much energy and so much enthusiasm, and I can see where people probably don't know how to handle you.
Well, I will say this just to leave you with a final thought, that when you've been in, I haven't been in my career that long. I still consider myself early, even going into like 10 years, which is so crazy to say. But you go through a lot of things. You have, good managers, bad managers, good experiences, bad experiences, companies that you love, companies that didn't love you back. You have a lot of things that you can learn and glean from. And I will say that starting a family in the midst of all that, and having to also hold yourself accountable at home by setting boundaries and living a healthy lifestyle, it causes a certain confidence and conviction that you'll know the things that you're willing to accept to reach your goals and the things that you're not, which is also an important conversation, because we all seem to talk so much about moving up and moving forward. But in some instances, some of us kind of want to stay where we're at because we have a lot of other things going on, which is also fine. But I think that, and thank you for saying that, Kim, but I've just been through a lot of things in my career that have given me kind of the tough skin to know what I will and won't accept and how I want to be perceived. And I never want, my branding or my performance to keep me from getting into a room or opening a door that I've decided that I want to open. And we don't have control over people's actions, but we have some type of control or influence over how people perceive us. And so I just try to manage what I can control.
Yeah, that's great advice. Well, thank you for everyone for coming to this M2Z Lunch and Learn. It was great to get to know more about you, Lauren, and thank you for sharing with us today.
Thank you all so much for having me. It is really a pleasure, and I really enjoy all of the events that you have and how you're bringing women in automotive together. And I think that this conversation with Millennial and Gen Z women, although the advice can be applied at any stage in your career, is very important because it's just great to have that network and support as soon as you get into your career. So thank you all for inviting me and for everybody that attended and asked questions too.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, guys. Have a great day.
Okay, bye everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.